The genesis of our tale lies nestled in the heart of Harmony Creek, a town as idyllic as its name suggests. Here, the first community church stood as a beacon, its white steeple piercing the sky, a testament to the town's enduring values. But beneath the veneer of tranquility, tensions simmered, mirroring the broader societal divisions that plagued the nation. The church, known for its progressive stance on social issues, was led by Pastor Michael, a man of passionate convictions and a heart brimming with good intentions. Though perhaps a touch impetuous, he was a charismatic speaker, drawing congregants from all walks of life, united by a shared desire for spiritual guidance and community. However, Pastor Michael's unwavering commitment to his beliefs sometimes led him down paths fraught with unintended consequences. Harmony Creek, while outwardly serene, harbored its own quiet storms, and the intersection of faith and politics was about to ignite a tempest within its most cherished institution. The scene was set, the players were in place, and the stage was ready for a drama that would challenge the very foundations of their community. Now, let us turn our attention to Officer John, a man of quiet strength and unwavering dedication. He embodied the very essence of service and protection. He was a pillar of the Harmony Creek Police Department, respected by his colleagues and the community alike. John wasn't a man who wore his politics on his sleeve. In fact, few knew of his conservative leanings. He viewed his faith as a private matter, a source of personal strength and guidance. He sought solace within the walls of First Community Church, drawn to its sense of community and the comforting rhythm of its services, despite holding different political views than most of the congregation. Following a rally in support of his chosen party, John, still wearing his Make America Great Again hat, felt a pull to attend the Sunday service. It was a simple act, born not of defiance, but of a desire to connect with his faith community after a charged political event. Unbeknownst to him, this seemingly innocuous decision would set in motion a chain of events that would test the very fabric of Harmony Creek and challenge the principles of tolerance and understanding within its most beloved institution. He walked through the church doors, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the threshold. The sanctuary was bathed in the soft glow of stained glass windows as Officer John entered, the familiar hymns playing softly in the background. Heads turned, not in welcome, but in a mixture of surprise and disapproval. The bright red MAGA hat perched atop his head was an unwelcome splash of color in the otherwise harmonious scene. Pastor Michael, standing near the altar greeting parishioners, caught sight of John. A shadow crossed his face, his smile faltering. He felt a surge of conflicting emotions, a sense of offense, a concern for the unity of his congregation, and a nagging feeling that something needed to be done. He watched as John found a seat near the back, his presence radiating an almost palpable tension. The air seemed to thicken, the hymns losing their comforting melody. Pastor Michael tried to focus on the upcoming service, but his gaze kept drifting back to the man in the red hat. The symbol felt like a personal affront, a direct challenge to the values he held dear and the inclusive environment he strived to create within the church. He knew he couldn't ignore it. The question was, what to do? The weight of the decision pressed heavily upon him. As the opening hymn concluded, Pastor Michael made his way down from the altar, his steps deliberate, his expression a carefully constructed mask of composure. He approached Officer John, taking a deep breath before speaking. "John," he began, his voice low but firm, "welcome, but I must confess, I'm troubled by your attire." He gestured subtly towards the hat. "This is a place of worship, a sanctuary for all. That hat, however, carries a lot of baggage. It represents ideals that are deeply divisive and, frankly, offensive to many in our congregation." He paused, searching John's face for any sign of understanding or remorse. Finding none, he continued, his voice growing slightly more forceful. "I understand you have your beliefs, and you're entitled to them. But wearing that hat in this space feels disrespectful. It disrupts the sense of peace and unity we strive to maintain. Here, I must ask you, as a sign of respect for this community, to please remove it." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, silencing the murmurs of the congregation. The confrontation had begun. Officer John, taken aback by the public confrontation, remained seated, his expression hardening. He looked directly at Pastor Michael, his eyes reflecting a mixture of surprise and defiance. "With all due respect, Pastor," he replied, his voice calm but firm, "I'm here to worship, just like everyone else. This hat is a symbol of my beliefs, just as your sermons are a symbol of yours. I'm not disrupting anything. I'm simply exercising my right to express myself." He paused, tilting his head slightly. "Are you saying that people with different political views aren't welcome here? Is this church only for those who agree with you?" The air crackled with unspoken accusations. Pastor Michael felt a surge of frustration. He hadn't intended to create a scene, but John's refusal felt like a personal challenge to his authority and the values of the church. "It's not about agreeing with me," he retorted, his voice rising slightly. "It's about creating a welcoming and inclusive space for everyone. That hat, it undermines that. If you can't remove it, then I'm afraid I must ask you to leave." The tension reached its peak, the congregation holding its breath, waiting for John's response. A long silence followed, broken only by the nervous shuffling of feet. Officer John, his jaw tight, met Pastor Michael's gaze unflinchingly. He slowly shook his head. "I will not," he stated, his voice resonating with quiet resolve. "I have a right to be here, and I will not be bullied into silencing my beliefs." Pastor Michael's face flushed. He hadn't anticipated such staunch resistance. He glanced around at the congregation, seeing a sea of anxious faces, some nodding in agreement with him, others looking on with dismay. He felt the weight of their expectations, the pressure to uphold the values he had preached for so long. "Then I must insist," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "that you leave. This is my final request." Officer John, without another word, rose from his seat. He looked at Pastor Michael, a flicker of disappointment in his eyes, before turning and walking towards the exit. The red MAGA hat stood out starkly against the backdrop of the serene sanctuary as he made his way down the aisle, a figure of quiet defiance. As the doors closed behind him, a collective gasp swept through the church. The silence that followed even more deafening than before. The ejection was complete. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind Officer John, the sound echoing through the stunned silence of the sanctuary. The congregation remained frozen, as if time itself had stopped. Then, a wave of murmurs began to ripple through the pews, growing louder with each passing second. Some whispered in hushed tones, expressing their shock and disbelief at what had just transpired. Others voiced their support for Pastor Michael, praising his courage to stand up for his principles. Still others muttered their disapproval, questioning the pastor's judgment and the message it sent to the community. A few of the more outspoken members began to engage in heated debates, their voices rising above the general din. Mrs. Henderson, a staunch liberal, applauded the pastor's actions, while Mr. Peterson, a quiet conservative, shook his head in disappointment. The seeds of discord had been sown, and they were taking root with alarming speed. Pastor Michael stood at the altar, his face pale, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He had acted impulsively, driven by his convictions, but now, faced with the fallout, he couldn't help but wonder if he had made the right choice. The peace of Harmony Creek had been shattered, and he was left to pick up the pieces. The immediate aftermath of the incident at First Community Church was a maelstrom of emotions and fractured loyalties. The church, once a haven of unity, became a battleground of ideologies. Arguments erupted at coffee hour, during Bible study, and even in the parking lot after services. Long-standing friendships were strained, and new alliances were forged along political lines. Hurt feelings festered, fueled by misunderstandings and misinterpretations. Two distinct factions emerged: those who staunchly supported Pastor Michael, praising his courage to stand up against what they perceived as hate and division, and those who felt he had overstepped his bounds, violating the principles of tolerance and inclusivity that the church supposedly championed. The pro-pastor group argued that the MAGA hat represented a hateful ideology that had no place in a house of worship. The pro-officer John group countered that the church should be a place for all, regardless of their political beliefs, and that the pastor's actions were a form of discrimination. The chasm between the two sides widened with each passing day. threatening to tear the church apart at its seams. The sense of community, once so strong, was replaced by an atmosphere of suspicion and animosity. The revelation came unexpectedly, like a bolt from the blue. Pastor Michael was at Miller's Diner, a local haunt where he often grabbed a quick lunch. He overheard a conversation between two men at the next table, discussing the recent incident at the church. "Can you believe what happened to John? Kicked out just for wearing a hat, and him being one of our finest, too?" One of the men said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Finest? What do you mean?" the other replied. "Finest officer. That's what. John's been with a Harmony Creek PD for 15 years. Quiet guy, doesn't talk about it much, but he's a good one." Pastor Michael froze, his fork clattering against his plate. Officer John, the police officer, the blood drained from his face. He excused himself and rushed outside, his mind reeling. The implications of his actions hit him with full force. He hadn't just kicked out a member of his congregation. He had publicly humiliated a respected law enforcement officer. The potential consequences were staggering. Not only had he further divided his church, but he may have also alienated a crucial figure in the community. Regret washed over him, a bitter and overwhelming tide. He had to do something, and fast. Panic gnawed at Pastor Michael as he frantically sought guidance. First, he turned to the church elders, a group of respected and seasoned members who had served the church for decades. They listened intently, their faces etched with concern. Some offered cautious support, while others expressed their disappointment and warned of potential legal ramifications. Next, he contacted denominational leaders, seeking advice on how to navigate the ethical and spiritual complexities of the situation. They stressed the importance of reconciliation and urged him to approach Officer John with humility and sincerity. Driven by growing anxiety, Pastor Michael even consulted with a lawyer, fearing potential lawsuits or accusations of discrimination. The lawyer outlined the possible legal challenges he might face, emphasizing the importance of demonstrating remorse and taking corrective action. Sleepless nights followed, filled with self-doubt and fear. He wrestled with questions of faith, justice, and the limits of his own authority. The weight of his actions bore down on him, threatening to crush him under its immense pressure. He knew he had to find a way to make amends, not only for the sake of the church, but also for his own conscience. For Officer John, the experience was deeply wounding. He felt a profound sense of betrayal, a stinging rejection from the very community he had sought solace in. The church had always been a place where he could put aside the stresses of his job and connect with something larger than himself. Now, it was tainted by the memory of public humiliation. He wrestled with conflicting emotions. As a police officer, he was sworn to uphold the law and protect the rights of all citizens, including the right to free expression. Yet, his own expression had been deemed unacceptable, his beliefs unwelcome. He felt a growing resentment towards Pastor Michael and a deep disappointment in the church he had once trusted. The thought of legal action crossed his mind. He knew he had a strong case, but the prospect of suing a church, of further dividing the community he served, gave him pause. He confided in a few close colleagues at the police department, seeking their advice. Some urged him to fight for his rights, while others cautioned him against escalating the situation. Ultimately, he decided to wait, to see if Pastor Michael would make an effort to apologize and make amends. He needed to know if the church was truly committed to inclusivity, or if his ejection was simply a reflection of its intolerance. Humbled and remorseful, Pastor Michael embarked on a mission to apologize to Officer John. However, reaching him proved more challenging than he anticipated. He started by calling the Harmony Creek Police Department, only to be met with polite but firm resistance. He was told that Officer John was unavailable and that any personal communication would have to go through official channels. Undeterred, Pastor Michael attempted to visit Officer John at his home. He drove to the address listed in the town directory, but no one answered the door. He left a handwritten note, expressing his sincere regret and requesting a meeting to discuss the matter further. Days turned into weeks, and he received no response. He even tried reaching out through mutual acquaintances, hoping someone could act as a mediator, but Officer John remained distant and unapproachable. Each failed attempt only deepened Pastor Michael's sense of guilt and desperation. He understood that he had caused Officer John immense pain and that earning his forgiveness would not be easy. He realized that his impulsive actions had not only damaged the church, but had also created a deep rift between himself and a valuable member of the community. The path to reconciliation seemed long and arduous, but he was determined to persevere, no matter the obstacles. Recognizing the escalating crisis and the widening rift within the community, several well-meaning individuals stepped forward to mediate. Among them was Martha Olson, a retired schoolteacher and a lifelong resident of Harmony Creek, revered for her wisdom, fairness, and unwavering commitment to the town's well-being. Martha had known both Pastor Michael and Officer John for years and believed that a path to reconciliation was still possible. She began by speaking with each of them separately, listening to their perspectives and acknowledging their pain. She reminded Pastor Michael of the importance of forgiveness and understanding, urging him to demonstrate genuine humility and empathy. She spoke to Officer John about the need for compassion and the potential for healing, emphasizing the importance of preserving the unity of the community. Martha then proposed a meeting between the two men, suggesting a neutral location where they could speak openly and honestly without the pressures of the church or the police department. She offered to facilitate the conversation, guiding them towards a resolution that would benefit both themselves and the community as a whole. Her calm demeanor and unwavering optimism provided a glimmer of hope in the midst of the turmoil, reminding everyone that even the deepest divisions could be bridged with understanding and goodwill. Following Martha's counsel and driven by his own conscience, Pastor Michael made the courageous decision to offer a public apology. The next Sunday service was filled with an almost palpable tension. The congregation, still deeply divided, waited with bated breath to hear what their pastor would say. Pastor Michael stood before them, his voice filled with sincerity and humility. "My dear friends," he began, "I stand before you today with a heavy heart, filled with regret and remorse. I acted impulsively and wrongly when I asked Officer John to leave our church. My actions were not in line with the values of inclusivity and compassion that we strive to uphold here." He continued, his voice cracking with emotion. "I was wrong to prioritize my own political beliefs over the need to create a welcoming space for all. That I was wrong to judge Officer John based on his attire and to assume that his presence was disruptive. And I was especially wrong to act without knowing the full story, without understanding the man I was judging." He then turned his gaze towards the back of the church, where Officer John was seated. "Officer John, I am truly sorry. I hope that one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me." He pledged to learn from his mistake and to dedicate himself to building a more inclusive and understanding community. The weight of the congregation's gaze shifted to Officer John. He sat quietly, his expression unreadable. After a long moment, he rose slowly from his seat. He walked towards the altar, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He stopped a few feet from Pastor Michael, looking him directly in the eye. "Pastor Michael," he began, his voice steady and clear, "I appreciate your apology. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong, especially in public." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm willing to consider forgiveness, but forgiveness isn't simply a gift. It has to be earned." He continued, "What happened here was more than just a personal offense. That it was a violation of the principles this church claims to stand for. It sent a message that some people aren't welcome here, that some beliefs are less valid than others. To truly earn my forgiveness, you need to demonstrate a real commitment to inclusivity. You need to show me and the entire community that this church is a place where everyone, regardless of their political beliefs, can feel safe and respected." He challenged the church to take concrete steps to promote understanding and tolerance, emphasizing the importance of accountability and genuine change. The path to reconciliation, he made clear, required more than just words. Following Officer John's challenge, First Community Church embarked on a deliberate path to healing and reconciliation. Pastor Michael, with the support of the church elders and denominational leaders, initiated a series of programs designed to address the divisions within the community and foster a greater sense of understanding and respect. Open forums were organized, providing a safe space for members to share their perspectives, air their grievances, and engage in constructive dialogue. Trained facilitators guided the discussions, ensuring that all voices were heard and that the conversations remained respectful and productive. Diversity training sessions were implemented, educating congregants on issues of bias, prejudice, and discrimination. These sessions encouraged self-reflection and challenged individuals to examine their own assumptions and stereotypes. The church also organized several community service projects, bringing together members from different political backgrounds to work towards a common goal. These projects, such as volunteering at a local soup kitchen or cleaning up a neighborhood park, provided opportunities for people to connect with one another on a personal level, transcending their political differences. Slowly but surely, the atmosphere within the church began to shift, trust began to rebuild, and the seeds of reconciliation began to sprout. The process was not easy, and there were still moments of tension and disagreement, but the church was moving forward, guided by a renewed commitment to inclusivity and understanding. The incident at First Community Church left an indelible mark, shaping the future trajectory of the church, its pastor and officer John. For Pastor Michael, the experience was a profound lesson in humility and the dangers of impulsivity. He became a more thoughtful and empathetic leader, committed to listening to diverse perspectives and fostering a culture of inclusivity. He championed initiatives that promoted dialogue and understanding, ensuring that the church remained a welcoming space for all, regardless of their political beliefs. Officer John, too, was deeply affected by the events. While the initial sting of betrayal lingered, he eventually came to appreciate the church's genuine efforts to make amends. He became an advocate for respectful dialogue and understanding across political divides. Recognizing the importance of building bridges rather than walls, he even began to participate in some of the church's community service projects, finding common ground with members he had previously viewed as adversaries. The church itself emerged from the crisis stronger and more resilient. While the scars of the division remained, the community had learned valuable lessons about tolerance, empathy, and the importance of upholding its core values. The incident served as a constant reminder of the need to create a truly inclusive space where everyone felt valued and respected, regardless of their political affiliations. Harmony Creek had weathered the storm, and in doing so, had discovered a newfound appreciation for the power of unity and understanding. The true resolution came unexpectedly, not through grand gestures, but through a shared commitment to serving the community. A devastating storm swept through Harmony Creek, leaving many homes damaged and families displaced. Pastor Michael and Officer John found themselves working side by side, coordinating relief efforts, distributing supplies, and offering comfort to those in need. In the midst of the chaos, a moment of mutual understanding arose. They were both exhausted, covered in mud, and working tirelessly to help a family salvage what remained of their home. As they shared a brief break, a simple conversation revealed their common ground, a deep love for their community and a desire to make a difference in the lives of others. It was then that Officer John extended his hand to Pastor Michael, a gesture of forgiveness and acceptance. Pastor Michael clasped it firmly, his heart filled with gratitude. The deep divisions that had once separated them seemed to fade away, replaced by a shared sense of purpose and a renewed respect for one another. The storm had brought destruction, but it had also paved the way for healing and reconciliation, demonstrating the power of forgiveness and the possibility of finding common ground even after deep divides. The story of Harmony Creek serves as a microcosm of the challenges facing our increasingly polarized society. It highlights the pervasive nature of political divisiveness, the erosion of religious tolerance, and the urgent need for empathy and understanding in a world where differences are often viewed as threats. Bridging divides in fractured communities is no easy task. It requires a willingness to listen to opposing viewpoints, to challenge our own biases, and to recognize the humanity in those with whom we disagree. It demands a commitment to creating spaces where respectful dialogue can flourish and where individuals feel safe expressing their beliefs without fear of judgment or reprisal. The journey of First Community Church reminds us that even after deep divisions, healing and reconciliation are possible. It demonstrates the transformative power of forgiveness, the importance of accountability, and the potential for finding common ground through shared service and a commitment to the greater good. As we navigate the complexities of our own polarized world, let us remember the lessons of Harmony Creek and strive to build bridges of understanding, one conversation, one act of kindness, one shared moment at a time. The future of our communities, and perhaps our world, depends on it.